the name Colin can be very hurtful. It's very derogative. It can be very demeaning. It makes you feel different with a lot of the language that's out there about travellers. It can make you feel as though you are not worthy, that you are not a valued citizen, that you're an outcast.
The language used in political discourse, in newspapers, etc., lead into what happens in society, because they breed and they allow a certain construction of an image to take place surrounding any group of people. The discourse surrounding travellers is largely negative. Anyone that does do anything different or positive, your identity is actually called into a question, because well, you're not really like them, which I think is problematic. But I think not calling out language, that's how things start. It starts with basic othering of people, and that othering leads to people seeing them as subpar, less than.
When you have members of parliament using their privilege to say things like the community is a disease, or a vermin, or a swarm, particularly in relation to roadside encampments, not unauthorised sites, but roadside encampments, that's what they are. We need to get the language right on that as well. And I think it's just unfair and unjust and just not appropriate that our legal, our democratic representatives and our media reporters just try to think again about how they use that language, both in print and also in public forums when they speak.
There's a lot of hate language about out there just by identifying as a traveller. People come and they have assumptions of who you are, what you are, and why you are, and where you live, and how you live, purely by saying you're a traveller. Often people will shun away from you, and their use of language can be very derogative in terms of calling you pikey, knacker, jippo, tinker, and all of these terms to describe travellers are deeply offensive and hurtful.
As I said, words are bullets. They have an impact. People need to realise that. And one of the things, one of the reasons I stand behind the Traveller movement and its campaigns is because it's seriously trying to challenge the ways in which we, really to try and bring back a degree of civility, a civility to the way we conduct our public affairs. And I think that's really important.
We are about to launch the Cut It Out campaign, which is essentially for politicians and everybody else to cut it out. So what you're saying, the law might allow it within Parliament, but actually it's your responsibility as an individual within your party, etc., to cut it out and stop saying it for you, but also to call other people out on their behaviour. And that's the responsibility of every individual. In the same way that it's the responsibility of white people to call out racism, of men to call out sexism, it's also the responsibility of non-travellers to call out anti-gypsyism.
I think there's new generations of young, particularly young traveller activists who are kind of coming through, they're putting their heads above the parapet, they're speaking out, they're not shy of who they are and where they've come from, and they're reaching out to other equality organisations, whether it's other racial equality groups, whether it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender groups. The disability movement has had a massive impact on how traveller organisations conduct their business and go about their work. Nothing about us without us has been adopted by Roma rights organisations, but that came from disability lobbying groups. And it's really important that we acknowledge that and don't plagiarise that. I think we need to be called to have some degree of accountability about where that came from. But I'm just so glad that these days that's all changing. Alliances are starting to form.
I think because hate crime can't be tackled only by one person, but actually it's the responsibility of everybody in society to tackle hate crime, even if it doesn't affect you. I think often we can only call out things, or people only call out things when it affects them, but actually your duty is to call it out, regardless of who it's affecting.
I think that people who don't experience any sort of the problems that we do, that they get an insight and an opportunity to hear the voices of travellers. And it gives us travellers a platform to speak out and to say what we have experienced, purely because we're travellers.